A very good morning to you if you're just joining us. What's happened to the million AstraZeneca doses procured by South Africa about a month ago? This is the big question being asked by many people about COVID-19 vaccines that was subsequently discarded by our government. The AstraZeneca vaccine was found to have limited efficacy against infections caused by the COVID-19 variant 501Y-V2. And the government has since announced that it will offer the AstraZeneca doses to the AU. But what is the current status of the vaccines? Joining us now is Professor Shabir Madhi. He is the Dean of the Wits Faculty of Health Sciences. Prof, good morning to you. I have read an article where you are quoted as saying you are mortified that government has decided to let go of these vaccines. Let me start off by asking that very question. Do you blame government for abandoning these vaccines?
Good morning to you. So I do find it somewhat odd that the government has decided to abandon the AstraZeneca vaccine, particularly in a context that government has always insisted that it actually takes its advice from the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization has come out and made it clear that even in countries where the variant that you referred to is circulating, those countries should continue using the AstraZeneca vaccine. I think we need to just clarify exactly what the findings of the study in South Africa were and what you can't interpret from it. The study that was done in South Africa really looked at a relatively young age group demographic, and all that we were able to show is that the vaccine doesn't provide protection of 60% or more against mild and moderate infection. So when I'm referring to mild infection, I'm referring to something as mild as an individual with a cough who has a PCR. And the vaccine, unfortunately, didn't confer protection of 60% or greater. And that was the only question that we were able to address in the study. The study doesn't address whether the vaccine protects against severe disease. And all indications are that with this vaccine being very similar to the J&J vaccine in terms of the technology that's used to develop the vaccine, as well as the immune responses that are induced by this vaccine, that there's strong reason to believe that the AstraZeneca vaccine would protect against severe disease. And that is the basis on which WHO makes a recommendation for countries to continue using the AstraZeneca vaccine, even where the B1351 variant is circulating. So it does come as somewhat as a surprise that in the past, government has always indicated that it takes its advice from what WHO directs, and this time around we seem to be going in exactly the opposite direction.
But Prof, there is though the other element to this story, and that is that of the expiry date, which you speak about in that particular article. I think it was on News 24. Firstly, let's deal with the issue around the expiry date. What responsibility should the Serum Institute of India take for selling us a batch with a short lifespan?
So I don't think it's an issue of Serum Institute. As the procurer of the vaccine, there's sort of a checklist that you go through to ensure that the goods that you're purchasing is basically meeting the criteria that you set. So when you purchase something and it's got a 1-year warranty, you know upfront it's got a 1-year warranty. When it comes to biologicals, when you do procure those biologicals, part of the procurement process is to know what is the expiry date. So these are issues, these are checks that should have taken place not after the vaccine arrived, but rather before the vaccine arrives. And if you speak to any of the other importers of any of the biologicals, they'll tell you that is exactly the way it happens. So this is not a problem of Serum Institute. Unfortunately, there were sort of flaws in terms of the procurement process. Maybe we rushed into it because government was under pressure in terms of getting vaccine as quickly as possible. But it's unfortunate what's happened was only picked up after the vaccines arrived, when it should have formed part of a checklist before the procurement was actually undertaken.
So the government, in essence here, they should shoulder the blame for buying a vaccine that was going to expire sooner than expected.
What I'm saying is that due diligence should have been done in terms of not just the price of the vaccine, but also what the expiry date is in relation to what the plans were to roll out the vaccine. So there's no problem of getting a vaccine that's going to expire in 6 weeks' time or in 3 months' time if you've got a systems in place to be able to vaccinate everyone, to use up the vaccine in the space of a month. So obviously there's different factors to it, but in terms of the issue of the expiry date itself, that should have been picked up when they were doing a due diligence assessment in terms of the vaccine they were procuring.
Sure. Prof, we know that the Minister of Health has said that these vaccines will be sold to the African Union. Firstly, do you know the status of these vaccines? Where are they right now? And as we obviously ponder the expiry date.
So I think my knowledge of it is probably as good as yours, in that my only knowledge of it is what comes out in the media. This morning, the CEO of BioVac indicated that they have been instructed to prepare the vaccine for shipment elsewhere without actually getting into details. So it seems that process is underway. I would be very surprised if there's many takers for the vaccine from South Africa right now, given its expiry date of middle of April, because very few countries on the continent have got infrastructure that's been set up to be able to deploy vaccines in a space of 2 to 3 months, especially with this large quantity. In addition to which, many of the African countries are now beginning to receive the AstraZeneca vaccine through the COVAX facility. And that vaccine for many low-income countries is coming at a much lower cost than what South Africa paid for its procurement of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
So is it wishful thinking by our government that we think we could recover this money by selling off and shipping this batch to somewhere on the continent?
Certainly, I believe so. Government might have might have a different understanding of it, and there might be things underway that I'm unaware of. But I think that this vaccine that is available in South Africa would probably be better used within South Africa, offered to individuals at high risk of developing severe disease for them to volunteer to take it, because the toss-up in South Africa essentially, before we experience another resurgence, is largely leaving people unvaccinated as opposed to vaccinating them with a vaccine that has got a strong likelihood of protecting against severe disease.
Sure, Professor. Just remind us then, how much did we pay for these vaccines? And as skeptical as you are you then alluding that all of this money might actually have gone to waste?
Well, the cost of the vaccine was $5.25 per dose. So you can do your calculations in terms of the rand amount. If I'm not mistaken, it came out to around about 125 million rand or something in that region. I don't know the exact number, but the per unit cost was $5.25. In terms of where we stand right now, unfortunately, I believe that unless we start using the vaccine very quickly, we do risk in all of this vaccine going to waste, especially if the company itself is unable to extend the expiry date. There is a possibility that the company can extend the expiry date if they do the proper stability testing of the product. But right now, I think I'm afraid that we're going to have wasted this money when this vaccine probably could still provide some protection, and in fact quite high protection against severe disease and protect people from dying. And we really need to let the citizens themselves choose. The vaccine has been procured. Again, I don't think that we're going to get many takers to procure the vaccine from South Africa, certainly not at the price that we paid for it, because through the COVAX facility, these countries, for AstraZeneca vaccine in Africa at least, are probably paying less than $1 a dose, nowhere close to $5 per dose.
So, final question, Prof. Two questions linked as one. There is the outstanding 500,000 batch that was part of this deal. Are you aware what the status of that is going to be? And then linked to exactly what you've just said, that the company could potentially extend the expiry date. Is that even possible, given some reports earlier that there might have been strained relations between ourselves and the Serum Institute of India?
Yeah, so I'm not aware of what's happening with the additional 500,000 doses. It obviously depends what agreement our government signed with Serum Institute of India, and there might well be a penalty clause if they wanting to withdraw from it. So I'm unaware what the exact contents of the agreement between South Africa and the Serum Institute of India is. In terms of the second part of the question, it's not uncommon for there to be an extension in terms of the expiry date when it comes to biologicals. But it goes through a due process in that there needs to be stability, what we call stability testing that's done on the part of the company, which shows that even if you extend it by a month or 2 months, it's not going to interfere with the potency of the product, as well as it's not going to create any safety issues. And those sort of things are very likely underway at Serum Institute of India, independent of what happened in South Africa and the Serum Institute. But I think it would be really unfortunate if the relationships between South Africa and the Serum Institute have been soured, because there are other vaccines which the Serum Institute will also be developing, which South Africa could greatly benefit from, including the Novavax vaccine, which we also tried out in South Africa, and which in fact is the only vaccine that has got compelling evidence that it actually protects against mild and moderate infection due to the variant that's currently circulating in South Africa.
Sure. Professor Shabir Madhi, thank you very much for that update on the status of the AstraZeneca vaccines, 1 million of them that were delivered to the country just last month. What is going to happen? Have we wasted money here? Those are the questions that we need to start asking.